and is giving people notice that Arsenal are on the ascent. So I think it's good business. It's a player that the manager obviously knew. It's a player that seems to respond to positive reinforcement. So long may it continue for Arsenal fans. And sadly, not for Arsenal Fan TV, because they haven't got any bad news to gloat or report over. Welcome to this week's edition of One to One with Simon Jordan. Don't forget to keep liking and subscribing, and equally as importantly, leaving your questions in the comment section below. And by the way, these questions are not pre-prepared, they're asked and I answer them instantaneously. But let's get on with this week's show. I mean, Anthony Joshua having a rant, having an outburst, is something that will cause a lot of controversy. It was a moment where I suspect exasperation met entitlement. He was brave to take the fight, although I believe that he probably didn't have much option. I'm not entirely sure that there's a necessity for it. It's beginning to become a trend of people seeming to want to avail the world of their most innermost thoughts. Unless you've been an elite sports person, unless you've been a person that's been under what he considers to be extreme pressure. Extreme pressure is probably not going down to the ATM and finding out you've just been paid £40 million. Extreme pressure is probably not being able to pay your heating bill. But in contextual terms, if he feels under extreme pressure and feels the need to have aired his views. Look, there will be lots of people that have said things about Anthony Joshua and lots of people that will take it as an opportunity to batter him. I do think that the post-fight press conference, was a contrived attempt to try and pare back from that, and the tears and all of that will probably be pound hound Eddie Hearn chasing after him and saying, Jesus, you're killing the golden goose here, we've still got some opportunities to make lots of money. I thought it was a ridiculous rant, but there was a fighter that had gone in there, done his very best and worked out that he wasn't at that level, and it must have been quite disappointing for him. So I found the whole thing a little bit unedifying and unnecessary. I'm sure a lot of other people did. A lot of people made observations. I think Fraser Clark, the boxer, made observations about having AJ stealing Usyk's moment and after other things. And of course, then what you'll hear is the boxing royalty saying, how dare you speak, you've only won 2 fights. But the bottom line is, it was a strange fight from start to end. You've got a situation where you've got a fight being held in Saudi Arabia, when the boxing capitals of the world would have given it more crackle and more energy in Las Vegas or London. You've got a broadcaster in Sky that spent their whole time telling us about anti-discrimination whilst broadcasting a fight from one of the most discriminated places in the world. You've got a fighter that had a fight scored as a split decision, which no one in a parallel universe and any sensible thinking would ever see that as a straight win for Usyk. There was no split decision, it was an absolute unanimous win by Usyk. And then you've got all that goes around it in terms of Anthony Joshua's expectations of himself and what he's been led to believe. He's been led to believe that he is entitled to fawning deference and not necessarily critical judgment. So I was disappointed for him. I was disappointed with him. But you have to also put things in context. At the end of the day, how harmful was it? People will take cheap shots at him. He went in and did his best. He wasn't good enough. What I can tell you is, having seen what I saw, Tyson and Fury would beat both of those two guys in the same afternoon. At this moment in time, Gabriel Jesus looks like a Rolls Royce in a very confident and buoyant Arsenal side. It is early days, but he is obviously being given the mantle and the pedestal and the belief that he's the main man, and he's taking advantage of that. What you're seeing is far more from him probably than you saw from him in Man City in his entire time. Now, of course, there's a focus because he's now being put centre stage. There's an element of Arsenal have a great deal of media interest because of the size and scale of the football club, its previous achievements, and Arteta and his management. But at £45 million, which was the price, in any shape or form, if you can think that £45 million for a footballer is good business, in the market it looks good. Arsenal look good. Bournemouth were dreadful. But in their previous 2 games against Palace, they caught at a very beginning of the season Palace and played well, and he was very good in that game. But I think the person that looks absolutely phenomenal is Zinchenko. But Jesus looks like he's ready for a World Cup, ready to make his point, ready to play down the middle, and certainly he looks very, very good in this Arsenal side and is giving people notice that Arsenal are on the ascent. So I think it's good business. It's a player that the manager obviously knew. It's a player that seems to respond to positive reinforcement. So long may it continue for Arsenal fans. And sadly, not for Arsenal Fan TV, because they haven't got any bad news to gloat or report over. Obviously, I've mentioned it in a previous answer about my views on Fury versus Usyk and what that would manifest itself to look like. Usyk's made a statement after the fight. Of course, he's wrapped in emotion and all that goes with it about the only fight he'll want to take is Tyson Fury. I understand that. I don't think he beats Tyson Fury. I think everything that Anthony Joshua couldn't do to Usyk, Tyson Fury can. He won't allow Usyk to make those angles, to be in a situation that he was in with Anthony Joshua, and quite frankly, Tyson Fury is several levels above Anthony Joshua. So I think that's a fight he wins. I don't really care about how much money Tyson Fury gets paid. I'm getting a bit tired of all this about how much money fighters should be getting and where they should be taken to have these fights. You know, the only reason the fight on the weekend was in Saudi Arabia was because of the money. So I'd like it to be about a very respectable amount of money, which it will be wherever it's fought, but more about the fight. It's an interesting dynamic. I think Fury will take this fight. I think behind the scenes, Pound Hound Eddie Hearn will be trying to make sure he can rebuild Anthony Joshua. So somehow or another, the winner of Usyk Fury, which must have a rematch clause in it, surely both fighters will want a rematch clause if one of them were to lose their belts, will put Anthony Joshua fighting either Tyson Fury, and in my view, undoubtedly Tyson Fury, in 2 years' time. So my hope is that we don't have to listen to all this rubbish. If you're going to fight Tyson, fight. If you're not going to fight, shut up, go away, let someone else take your belts and move on. I hope, for the sake of what is a very interesting fight, that he gets to clean up. I think he'll clean Usyk's clock when he fights him, and then there'll be no doubts, because there's always been this doubt, and I've always maintained it. Fury was the lightning rod. Fury was the one that broke up the heavyweight division. Fury was the one that took Klitschko when he was probably more near his prime and took the belts and scattered them. Joshua was the beneficiary of that. So I want Fury to put down the marker, the rubber stamp, to reinforce my belief that he is generationally the best heavyweight we've got. And ultimately, if he wins all the belts, there'll be an undeniability about that. So hopefully, if we can get past all the bluster and all the BS, we can see Fury versus Usyk in England in front of 90,000 people inside a proper boxing stadium in the near future. Well, no one quite knows, as far as the World Cup is concerned, what's going to happen with the disruption of this football season. Some players are not going to be called up on World Cup duty, and ultimately some players are not playing for countries that haven't qualified for the World Cup, aka the Italians. So you'll have a situation where players are being rested, and I don't know how many Italians we've got in the Premier League, but notwithstanding that, you know, there's not that many games in the World Cup. There's 6 or 7 games to win a World Cup. Not all the players are going to be featured in all of those games. So I'm not entirely sure. I don't think anyone can see what's going to happen. Depends how many of the top players get injured whilst they're away. Depends how many of the top players have a really invigorating World Cup and come back even more full of juice, or how many of them have a poor World Cup and come back a little bit more demoralised or wanting to prove a point. It's such an unknown commodity. It's such an unknown and unprecedented set of circumstances, to use a much overused term in this day and age. I think the league is remarkably competitive this year. It's early, it's sunny, and people are at it and on it, and you're seeing teams like Leeds United that struggled to finish last season with any kind of pomp, avoided relegation by the skin of the teeth, really at it against teams like Chelsea that seem to be given excuses because they've only got 500 million pounds of players on the pitch and perhaps they should have 6. I think it's an intriguing ask, the question, and I think it's an undetermined answer because we don't know. My expectation is it'll be normal service and that the best teams will continue to be the best teams. But all in all, what we've got at this moment in time for the beginning of the season is a very competitive Premier League, and I don't suspect that anything will change post the World Cup. Look, I mean, I wrote a book. People say writing a book is cathartic, especially if the experiences were difficult. I felt it was like going into the room and taking a great big dump, quite frankly, and telling everyone how difficult things were. But we all have a different way of looking at the world. Look, I wrote a book to talk about the vagaries and peculiarities of football. I held myself to the same standards I held everybody else to. I was very judgmental of the world of football because I think it's an industry made up of charlatans and the emperor's new clothes and people taking liberties and people that are in positions that they shouldn't be in. And it's an industry where people take liberties, and it's a culture based upon Always having an excuse. But it's also a unique sport that brings so much to the world. So I wrote a book about my failings, my successes, and the industry, and showed something that most people haven't seen, which is how the youngest person in the world that owned a football club got to own a Premier League football club, and the journey he went on and the mistakes that he made. Now, as far as writing another book is concerned, obviously there were lots of things I could talk about. There's lots more expansion I could go on to, and I also could have a look at the state of the nations of the world. But I don't really have, specifically the football world, I don't really have a burgeoning ambition to sit there and write another book. It was hard yards. It was one of those, not so much bucket list, one of those things to be done. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, and one of my mates, Theo Prophetis, the Dragon's Den guy, turned around to me and said, "Write a bloody book, you've got a story to tell." So that was my moment. I'm possibly considering another book, but it's not on my list to do. I'm not motivated to want to do it. I have other things that I want to do, but maybe that will change. But anyone that's read the book, I hope you like it. Anyone that hasn't, hope you do read it. And anyone that read it that doesn't like it, what can I do? Right, that's it for this week's edition of One-to-One with Simon Jordan. Don't forget to let me know your views on post-fight speeches, Gabriel Jesus at Arsenal, and the possibility of Tyson Fury coming out of retirement and fighting Alexander Usyk. Of course, keep liking and subscribing and leaving those questions in the comment section below, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.